alongside tiropita pie if we were traveling in Greece. This is what a typical daily meal would look like. Greeks generally start out with a small breakfast, maybe a cup of herbal tea with some honey, or maybe some coffee, and then maybe dry bread or paximati, which is it's sort of like that cookie that we just talked about. It's more of a mix between a biscotti and a savory rusk. So something smaller for breakfast. But then because they have that smaller breakfast, and this is probably the reason that they do, it's so they can eat spanakopita or tiropita as a morning snack, maybe around 11 or so. But then it's the midday meal that is the main meal of the day, and that's maybe around 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And if you're at home, you would probably eat a vegetable casserole, really a hearty one, or a hearty vegetable stew. As Melina said, there isn't a ton of meat, maybe at home. You would also have some feta cheese and a salad, maybe a glass of wine as well. Well, of course, a glass of wine. And then if you're at a restaurant, you would have something more hearty, maybe a plate of fried sardines or anchovies, along with a couple more meze or salads that we'll talk about in a minute here. And then Greeks love their afternoon coffee. As I said, I make a mean cup of Greek coffee. Greek coffee is made in a long-handled brika, which is a long-handled, tiny little pot. So the handle is actually a little bit longer than the pot itself, but the pot is where the coffee grounds and the water are boiled together. And there's a special type of coffee ground that Greeks use. So you would want to look for that in a specialty store, because it's not the same as just grinding your regular coffee really, really fine. It's actually a special type that comes from different places around the world that is a unique formulation for your Greek coffee. But you boil the water and the grounds together, and you take it off the stove and you let it settle a little bit, and then you pour it into your cup, and you have a small demitasse cup. And it's actually not as high in caffeine as an espresso, as you might think. So that's why it's that special type of coffee. You probably wouldn't serve it with milk, but you would serve it with a lot of sugar. Yum. But this picture here in the slide, of course, the influence of the cafe lattes from around the world have made it to Greece. So occasionally Greeks will drink it with milk now. And of course, Starbucks is in Greece too. There's 28 Starbucks stores. So more protein from the milk is also a coming trend too, as more people around the world like to eat more protein at different times throughout the day. They would eat it with a cookie, usually their afternoon coffee. And there is actually one type of cookie that can be traced back to ancient Greece. It's a type of it's more like a candy bar. It's called pastelli, which is sesame seeds baked in honey that you can actually trace back to ancient Greece, and they're so yummy, so delicious. And then it's the afternoon or the late dinner, which is more of a meze style dinner. Next slide, please. That would be lots and lots of small plates, which I don't know about you, but I love the sort of small plate kind of dining that we used to see in restaurants before COVID, but now we're seeing again, and has actually been a lot of the way I cooked the last year, where I just pull different dips and things out of the fridge and serve it to the family, and hey, that's dinner. But in Greece, they've been doing that for generations, and it could be anything from different dips to salads, cheese, nuts, olives, some simple grilled vegetables, or tinned seafoods. Yummy, yummy tinned seafoods that you can find in Greece. The different types of small fishes, often in delicious, high quality olive oil. Don't drain that. You want to eat some of that too, because of course you've got benefits from the olive oil and the fishes when you consume that. So what types of dips would you have? Well, there's 3 that are very, very famous that are eaten together and often found together in restaurants and at home. And that would be your traditional hummus or hummus. But on Greece, it's usually made not with chickpeas. That's more of a Middle Eastern thing. It's still found in Greece, chickpeas, but more than often, it's a type of split pea. And so that is pureed together with lemon and served warm, and it's kind of that tart, creamy, warm dip. And then tzatziki, another famous one, which is the Greek yogurt-based dip with dill and cucumber and lots of garlic. And then lastly is the one in your dairy box, which is the hitipipi, and that is the Greek yogurt, or sorry, the feta cheese with peppers, and it can be anything like spicy peppers, or it can be the not so spicy, and you can have the it's more of like a cooling dip. So this is the one, and this is the one from my cookbook that is the hitipipi. And then you might serve those alongside, as I said, some of the cooling dips are served with maybe some grilled meats that might be spicy, or maybe some other grilled vegetables. So next slide, please. What would you drink? The house wine. House wine in Greece is one of the most best kept secrets in Europe. And that is because many of the Greek producers of wine are very small, and they do not export their delicious product. Instead, they serve it, they sell it to local restaurants. And so it is the thing to order. When we were there, we always just grab whatever's basically on tap. They have it in a barrel, usually in the back, and serve it out of the barrel. And we could see them pouring it in there, or they'll have it in a bottle too. And it is delicious. And you're probably not going to taste those grapes or those flavors anyplace else. One fun fact, although Greece did not invent wine, they basically made it for the masses. So many, many years ago, back all the way to antiquity, they did not drink straight up wine. In fact, they considered it barbaric to drink straight up wine. They often would drink it up to in a ratio of 20 to 1, 10 to 1, and that's water to wine. But anything below 2 to 1 ratio of water to wine was considered barbaric. So if anyone tells you that you not put an ice cube or anything in your wine, tell them that's the way that ancient Greeks used to drink it, and they almost invented it. All right, secondly, ouzo. Of course, that's the licorice flavored or fennel flavored aperitif, but it's also drunk as a digestive as well. Next slide. All right, these are the dietary guidelines for Greek adults. They came out from the government in 2017, and they are very similar to the dietary guidelines for Americans, but you can see that around there, many of the foods from the Mediterranean diet, the yogurt, the fruits and vegetables, legumes, beans, olive oil. But I would point you to number 5, where you see that the Greek government points out that those small fatty fishes are the ones that are most traditional in the Greek diet, and they have some of the best benefits, but they're also very sustainable. So they highlight those in there. And then of course, number 7, the Greek government tells their citizens to choose olive oil first, which of course makes lots of sense because they grow it there and it's the traditional Mediterranean diet fat. All right, next slide. All right, so what would you eat if you were on Greece, or how do you eat like a Greek? It's another way to ask it. I'm going to go through a couple different dishes, and then because I do a lot of these cooking and educational seminars on the Mediterranean diet, people always ask me, well, how do you eat Mediterranean, just simple steps? So I'll include a couple of different simple steps that if you just do these couple little things, you can eat more Mediterranean, eat like a Greek, and hopefully improve your health by taking these simple steps to eat more of the Mediterranean diet. All right, so for this first dip, this is a recipe from my book. It is tomatoes and shrimp cooked together, and then you add a big block of feta, and then you scoop everything up with a piece of pita bread. But it's very similar to the Greek dish called biryani, which is very, very traditional. And that is sort of a Greek ratatouille. So it's tomatoes and peppers and zucchini. And then it has also, like I said earlier, Greeks eat a lot of potatoes. They include in potatoes in their biryani dish. So that's very traditional. And again, it would be served with some feta cheese. All right, next slide. So that feta cheese, we already had that question about eating a block of feta versus the crumbles. Both are great, both are super high in nutrition. You obviously had your Gold Farms feta in your box, but Greeks eat a ton of feta, as Melina said. And why? Well, of course, everything is better with feta, right? So they eat, they're one of the highest consumers of cheese in Europe and actually in the world. And about half of their cheese consumption is feta. They eat about 10 pounds a year. And on Greece, it's traditionally sheep's and goat's milk together, or just sheep's milk. But we can't get a lot of that, so we're so happy that Gold Creek Farms makes their yummy feta. And it has it's very high in nutrition, high in calcium, potassium, magnesium, and of course protein. But it's a higher water content cheese. So, and it's a super hot, very flavorful cheese because it's soaked in a brine. And it's got that kind of tangy taste to it. So you actually can use a little less of it than you might other types of cheeses, because it's so yummy and flavorful. And one trick, if you do need to reduce the salt content of your cheese, one reason to buy the block of feta over the crumbles is you can rinse the block, and then you can lower the salt content of the cheese. So that's a great way to use it. And it also has kind of a creamier taste as well. So I agree with Melina. When I'm going to eat it, I like to use it that way. If I'm going to use it on a dish or crumble it on top of a pizza or something, then I might buy the crumbles. All right, next slide, please. All right, and then we've got our halloume, and that also came in your box. That's this grilling cheese. Now, what is a grilling cheese? Grilling cheese means that it is very, it's a cheese that has a high melting point. And so if you were to stick a slab of mozzarella on the grill or cheddar, it would fall right through the grill grates, right? But not halloume. You can put a thick slab of halloume on there, and instead it will get all toasty and brown on the outside, and it will not melt on the inside. You have some on your recipe sheet, but you can see this one. I have these nice grill grates, nice grill lines, and it's nice and toasty on the outside, but melty on the inside. And the reason why, this is so interesting to me, to learn how this cheese is made, just like all other cheeses, it's made with 3 ingredients. So that's your milk, your salt, and then your rennet. So you bring your milk and your salt to a warming temperature, you add your rennet, it separates the curds in the whey. And then with other cheeses, you would take those curds and you would scoop them into a mold, and then you would press it, and then you would have your cheese, and you would also add your culture. So you would add your cheddar culture to make it cheddar, or you would add your blue culture to make it blue. But with halloume, you take those curds and you don't put them into the mold. Instead, you heat them again. And because you heat them again, it has that higher melting temperature. And I was able to find some halloume in my local store, but if you can't find halloume and you want to make this salad in your box, you can also use regular string cheese because it has a little bit higher melting point, but you just want to freeze it first before you grill it, because then it will sort of maintain it and, you know, watch it really closely so it doesn't fall through the grates. But this is a very traditional way to eat halloume. This is, halloume was the traditional cheese of Cyprus, and that's where they eat it with watermelon in the summertime. And you have the grilled halloume with the refreshing sweet watermelon. It's such an awesome combination together. All right, next slide, please. And this is a picture of that halloume that you have in your box with an herb salad. So that's another way to use to eat more Mediterranean, is to eat more herbs. So I always tell people that Americans eat tablespoons of herbs, eat the Mediterranean way, and eat cupfuls of herbs. So you know how you go to the grocery store and you grab or if you have some in your garden, you grab a bunch of herbs and you use 1 tablespoon or 2 tablespoons in a dish, and then the rest of it just goes limp and slimy in the bottom of your refrigerator. But if you eat more Mediterranean and eat cupfuls of herbs, so adding it to salads like we do in this one, or adding it to any recipe, I guarantee any recipe that calls for a tablespoon of herb will be just as delicious with a cupful of herb, and it will be all kinds of benefits. Herbs are high in antioxidants, so high in nutrition. Herbs will not go bad in the bottom of your fridge, and you'll have less food waste, and you will be able to have better flavor in those dishes when you add more herbs to basically anything that you cook. All right, next slide. This is a yummy lentil whole grain vegetable soup. I talked about that a little bit earlier. That would be a typical meal for a midday meal. This is a recipe in our book that's a mushroom farro soup. And one way that we kick up the flavor of that is to add acid. So that's one of the best ways to eat more Mediterranean. So whether your acid is lemons and adding lemon juice to the end of something, a lot of times you're cooking a soup or a stew and you're like, oh, this just needs something, else. And normally you might grab the salt shaker and shake some salt in there. Don't. First, try adding just a tablespoon, just 1 tablespoon of lemon juice or red wine vinegar, which is what is in this dish, or even rice wine vinegar, or even distilled vinegar. Add that little bit of acid and it just adds more deliciousness to it. It's that sour taste that just kind of, or tart taste that just kind of perks up your taste buds and makes the food kind of sparkle. It just makes it more delicious. So try adding that. All right, next slide. All right, and then lastly, another last way to eat more Mediterranean is to use Greek yogurt. So use Greek yogurt in savory preparation. So this is a picture of a typical beet salad. There's one in my book that uses just shredded raw beets with carrots and apples and walnuts, and then Greek yogurt and lemon juice and a little bit of honey. And together, all those sweet, savory combinations just make a delicious salad with a few ingredients. But one way that we always have Greek yogurt in my house is when my kids don't like something, which can happen. Believe it or not, I'm a dietitian, yes, and I have kids that don't eat fish. So we put a bowl of Greek yogurt on almost every meal that we have. And when the kids don't like something, they can grab a scoop of Greek yogurt and spread that on there. And sometimes it takes off the taste. Sometimes it makes it just more delicious because you kind of have that tart flavor and that creamy flavor that makes it more of a familiar flavor for the kids. And so they enjoy their food more with those savory combinations of Greek yogurt. And of course, Greek yogurt is super nutritious. You've got your probiotics, your calcium, magnesium, protein, all of those things. Most Americans don't get enough magnesium and potassium. So those are 2 nutrients that Greek yogurt does have that you can add to more of your diet. So eating it along with a spicy grilled anything or a spicy food that will have that nice contrast with it is a great way to use Greek yogurt. All right, next slide. So I'm going to leave you here with a few Greek ingredients that you can peruse. And of course, adding any of those items to your cooking would make it more Greek. I also wanted to show the Herotipi dip that is in your dish or is in your box. This is the recipe from my book, and here is what it sort of looks like. Oh, it's kind of washed out here, but you don't have to use a food processor in it. That's one of the things that I mentioned in there. You can actually just use a blender or a KitchenAid mixer, and it will come out just beautiful with those red peppers in there as well.